رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون. الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى. والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: إن الله اصطفى آدم ونوحا وآل إبراهيم وآل عمران على العالمين. صلوات. I have recited ayat number 33 from Surah Al-Imran in order to seek the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, since these gatherings that we have in the month of Muharram are the gatherings which are associated to a special family which has been chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in that family we actually are remembering a very special individual by the name of Imam Al-Hussein bin Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. Since this is just 3 nights that I'm here, we had a gathering yesterday, tonight, and inshallah tomorrow night. I just wanted to continue with the theme that I had started in the 10, 11 lectures that I had during the month of Muharram, just to try to connect with the theme of last night for those who were not here. That there is a very prominent scholar among the Sunni community here in the United States of America who studied Islamic studies in Medina University, and then he came here, of course, with his Salafi mentality. Of course, whoever comes from there, educated from Medina, would be with that philosophy. And he was considered to be a very anti-Shia scholar. But later on, he went to Yale University, did his PhD over there. And this is where there was a change and shift in his opinion about the Shia community, which is a good thing, that he no more considers the Shias to be kafir, does not believe that any kind of violence towards them is justifiable. And even when it comes to the differences that we have between the Shias and the Sunnis on different issues, he believes in having a civil discourse about talking on these issues without insulting one another. And these are very positive signs which we welcome, as I said last night. If you look at the discussion between the Shias and Sunnis in the Middle East and Pakistan especially and Afghanistan, the only method of discourse is bullets and swords and nothing else. So these kinds of approach are in a way welcome. However, Dr. Yasir Qazi, in a speech that he gave last year on the issue of Karbala and Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he gave almost an hour 45 minutes talk about it, where many things were positive, but there were many issues which we considered to be controversial and problematic. And since he is a very prominent Sunni scholar, his remarks about Karbala and about Imam Hussein alayhi salam cannot be left, without a response. The issues he talked about, and I had, discussed about this in the 10, 12 majalis in New Jersey, where I was there for the first 12 days of Muharram. But there was some other issues which I would like to continue, and what the theme that I talked last night had to do with this tradition of Azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada that we have. Because Dr. Yasir Qazi, in his remarks, said that the religious Shiaism, because he divides Shiaism into two phases, a political movement till Karbala and a religious movement after Karbala, which is a problematic itself. We have dealt with that in other lectures. But then he says he relates that with the movement of Tawwabin. These are the Shias of Kufa who later on, after the massacre of Karbala, got together with the intention of seeking revenge against those who were responsible for killing Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Mukhtar was not part of that group. He had a different view about the timing of that task, and he did it later on. And so this group actually got together, and in their attempt to go and seek revenge from the Umayyad forces, they first went to Karbala, spent a night there, crying on the graves of the Shuhada. And one of the things that they did was they actually did what we call matam, or they bit themselves. And according to many, Salafi writers and scholars, they relate this whole process of Azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada that we do with that incident of the Tawwabin. And they say that that was done out of guilt of abandoning Hussein bin Ali. And the Shias are still, because of that feeling of guilt, do the Azah and bit themselves even now. And that's where we have problem of trying to, link that act of Tawwabin with the rest of the Shia world, even centuries coming, after that event, even if they had done it with that intention. He doesn't realize what is the reason behind this process of Azah, the grief and the mourning that we have for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, salawatullah alayhim ajma'een, salawat. Just to summarize what I said last night, when we look at the process of Azah, this tradition of mourning and grieving, as I had mentioned in detail, this is actually part of the natural phenomenon that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created among human beings. And, whenever people look or hear or see a tragedy, it affects them at different levels. And they react to it with a varying of degrees, which we describe in detail. And the summary was that since Azah, and this whole process of grieving and mourning is part of human nature, there is no room that Islam would say this is haram and bid'ah and forbidden. And we even looked at the seerah of the Prophet, and I talked about the two different ways of mourning and grieving, individual level and then the communal level. And we looked at the example from the seerah of the Prophet himself. When I mentioned that this process of mourning and grieving is part of human nature and it cannot become haram because this is natural, a young man later on last night when I was walking in the parking area came to me and raised a question which was a very valid question. And it's good to ask questions. There's no problem. We can always broaden our understanding. Speakers would get the opportunity to explain their idea more clearly if things were not that clear. And the question was that if I'm saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or Islam cannot forbid something which is a natural phenomenon, then what about the emotion of anger? Doesn't Islam say ghadab, and anger is not a good thing? And the answer is very simple. Ghazab itself is an emotion created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in human beings. Islam doesn't say totally suppress your anger and ghazab. Islam says there are limits. You can neither totally suppress that emotion which is part of human nature, nor should you let the anger dictate your behavior. You have to see the situation, time and place. There might be a time and a place where it is important to be angry. If it is for the betterment of the individual or the community or the society, and this is where we have this concept of being happy and pleased for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to be angry for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the issue is not that, ghadab is a negative thing, therefore it is forbidden by Islam. No, Islam does not forbid that. What Islam says, you have to control it. Where you should only use it in places where it is, required, and it would be considered to be absolutely right. Another example would be the element of shahwat, desire and passion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. Islam doesn't say it is forbidden. It is part of human nature. But Islam defines the limits. You are not allowed to fulfill your desires, whether it is food or anything else. It's part of human nature. You have to do that. You have to fulfill your desires, but within the limits that Sharia has placed upon you. If you go beyond it, that's where the hurmat and prohibition will come. And so even when we talk about azar, when we talk about grieving and mourning for the shuhada of Islam, this is part of the nature that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created within us. And as long as you do it within the bounds of the Sharia, there is absolutely nothing wrong about it. No learned person in the world of Islam can ever put the label of haram and bid'ah to the azar of Sayyid al-Shuhada, as long as it is done within the bounds of the Sharia. And we can, inshallah, we'll talk about it. For example, when you grieve for your own people, for example, a family member, there is nothing wrong about it. But for you to then complain against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is where the limits come in. So the whole issue of, feeling sad, grieving and mourning on passing away of somebody is part of human nature. It is absolutely jaiz. There is nothing wrong about it. But the issue is that you should not utter anything against the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat. And so let me continue the theme that I had last night, that no, whether it's Dr. Yasir Qazi or all other, Salafi scholars around the world, our azar is not an issue of the feeling of guilt. You have not understood our, sentiments on this issue. Number one, it is based on human nature, as I talked about it last night. And let me emphasize the point that the basis of our azar is not the sense of guilt. It is actually the sense of love. You do not know how much we love Ahlul Bayt. You do not understand the level of hub and love that we have for Imam Hussain alayhi salam and his family. And so when we, even though centuries have passed from that tragedy, even now when we hear about it, when we read about it, when we think about it, we have this sense of sadness in our hearts. Because when we look at our madhab is based on that ayat of Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet, that ask the ummah that I don't want anything from you except one, al-muwaddata fil qurba, that you love me, my family. And what is the demand of love? You be happy for the happiness of the beloved, and you be sad for the sadness of the beloved. These are the elements of hub and love. Because we love the Ahlul Bayt, we are happy when we hear about their good things. And because we love the Ahlul Bayt, whenever we hear about the tragedies which were inflicted upon them, we feel sad about it. And this is what the Imams have taught us themselves, where they say, according to the hadith of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu was-salam, شيعتنا يفرحون بفرحنا ويحزنون بحزننا. Our Shia become happy with our happiness, and our Shia become sad with our sadness. And so our, celebrations as well as commemoration, both are based on that principle of law. There is nothing as far as the issue of guilt is concerned. Salawat. Let me further talk about this process of azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada. Although last night I mentioned examples that this is not out from the religious principles and the sources. This is within our faith. We saw the sunnah of the Prophet as far as his words are concerned, as far as his silent approval is concerned, as well as his own action when it came to the mourning and grieving for the shahadat of Hamza, who was known as Sayyid al-Shuhada. Just to let everyone know that this title of Sayyid al-Shuhada, the chief of the martyrs, was for the first time used for Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet. It's only later on when the events of Karbala took place, because of the magnitude of that tragedy and the impact of that shahadat in Karbala, now Hussein becomes Sayyid al-Shuhada on a universal level. So Hamza was Sayyid al-Shuhada in that time frame, but when you talk about Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, he is Sayyid al-Shuhada on a universal level, with his own, special status that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to him. And so we see this process of azah of the shuhada as the sunnah of the Prophet. Let me further talk about it a little bit more tonight, that even individuals like Dr. Yasir Qazi could not deny the reality that the Prophet himself had foretold the events of Karbala, because it is there in their books. Whether you look at the books, narrations from Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal and others, where they talk about the time when the Imam was born, where Jibreel came and told Rasulullah about the shahadat of Hussein. And according to the narration even quoted by this fellow himself, that when Jibreel mentioned that to Rasulullah could not stop crying. And so this process of, even crying, even before the tragedy happened, just describing a tragedy which is about to happen, Rasulullah is crying. And this is where we see that, if I may paraphrase the whole incident there, that the first majlis for Abu Abdullah al-Hussein was a majlis where the reciter and zakir was Jibreel and the audience was Rasulullah himself. And Jibreel is mentioning the events, and Rasulullah as the member of the audience there is crying. And so this whole process of azah that we have, this is not bid'ah, this is actually the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Going further in history, after the events of Karbala, we see that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt went out of their way to emphasize the tragedy of Karbala. That do not ever, forget what happened in Karbala. It's not that other tragedies didn't take place. All the Imams, after Karbala, they also, they died with poisoning. Some of them went through very difficult times. But each of the Imam who came later on, if you ask them, whom should we remember? They didn't talk about their father or grandfather. They always said, remember Hussein. You look at the last years of the life of our seventh Imam, Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salatu wasalam. He was in the prison of Harun. And his last days were in the prison. He became, he died in the prison. And the way his body was taken out, That's all very tragic issues. But you go to his son, Imam Raza alayhi salam, and ask him that, oh Imam, whom should I remember? He doesn't talk about his father. He says, remember Hussein bin Ali. And so this remembrance of the tragedy of Karbala is actually very solidly found in the traditions of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. And they have done this in different ways. Number one, the emphasis on going for the ziyarat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Especially when you talk about the ziyarat of Arba'een. This whole phenomenon that we see now because of the means of communication in media is there. We come to know that these days millions of people go for that ziyarat to Arba'een. And this has been going on for centuries. The emphasis has been there from the Imams. Just look at the days of Mutawakkil. He is the person who was trying to erase this sign of the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. This is the times of the 10th and the 11th Imam. Our 11th Imam reciting, describing the 5 signs of a mu'min. He's coming now towards the time of the ghaibat, preparing the community for the era of the ghaibat. And he is now saying that there are 5 signs by which a mu'min is known. He could have selected any 5. But it's amazing that there he talks about the ziyarat of Arba'een. Going for the ziyarat of Imam Hussein on the day of Arba'een. That this is one of the 5 signs of being a Shia and a mu'min. The issue of reciting the ziyarat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. MashaAllah, our calendar is filled with events. Wiladas of the Imams, the special days that we have related to the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt. But when it comes to the ziyarat of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, it's not only for the day of Ashura or the day of Arba'een. We look at the 1st of Rajab. There is a special ziyarat on that day. 15th of Rajab, again special ziyarat there. 15th of Shaban is the wiladat of the Imam of the time, but the ziyarat we do for Hussein bin Ali. In Ramadan, Laylatul Qadr, historically nothing to do with Hussein. But in Laylatul Qadr, part of the amal is that do the ziyarat of Hussein bin Ali. When it comes to Eid al-Fitr, historically it's not linked to Hussein ibn Ali, but even on that day the recommendation is that you do the ziyarat for Hussein. Then you go on further and you look at the day of Arafah, historically not linked to Hussein, but the ziyarat we have specially for on that day also. Eid al-Adha, the same. And so even the days which are not related to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, special days, we are told by our Imams, do the ziyarat of Hussein bin Ali and remember him. Another third way of emphasizing this point. Poetry plays a very important role in building the emotions and the attachment of the community to their leaders. And this is in all cultures, especially among the Arabs also this was very common. And you will see from 5th Imam onwards, there were some very talented, Shia poets. And our Imams actually used to encourage people to compose what is known as Marsiya. Marsiya is the poetry where you are talking about the tragedies. And so it's not like Qasida, it is Marsiya. And Imams actually used to emphasize the hadith that we have that even if a person composes 2 lines of poetry in the remembrance of Hussein, he will go to Jannah, for example. Not only that, Imams actually used to invite such poets to their own homes. And they would actually request them that I would like you to recite the Marsiya and the poetry that you have composed for my grandfather Hussein bin Ali. There are narrations, for example, from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, where Imam inside his home, a poet had come to visit him and he says, I would like to hear the Marsiya from you. And so he arranged it. He even asked the workers in the house to erect a curtain there so that the women of the family of the Imam could also sit on the other side. And then he asked him to recite the Marsiyah, where the narration says that when he reaches to the tragic part of the Marsiyah, the Imam was crying, and even the women on the other side of the hijab were also heard crying. And so this is not only something that we hear that they talk about it, practically they showed to us that you do this azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And this issue of, putting a curtain there and the ladies sitting on the other side, remember this is the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. Unfortunately, in North America, things are, gradually moving the other way. We're becoming more westernized in that way. I don't have a problem with, becoming more modernized according to within the limits of the Sharia, but always remember, we cannot forget our values and the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. That separation has always been there. People use examples of Masjid al-Haram, but that's exception to the rule. Why do you take the exception and forget the actual rule? In many, many things, you have general guidelines and then you have exception to the rules. What happens when you go to Masjid al-Nabi? Nobody talks about it. What about a haram of Amir al-Mu'minin in Najaf? What about the haram of Karbala? When you go inside, men and women are separated. So let us not forget our core values, and just in the name of progress, we try to diminish those things. And this is the seerah that we get from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, all the way from the days of the Prophet till the Ghaybat al-Sughra, when you come to the days of 11th Imam and the later days. Salawat. And so they encouraging people to compose poetry, and I'll come to the English issue later on. Inviting poets to their homes, Imams doing that, so that they may hear the Marsiyah from them directly. Rewarding poets. And this is also a very common theme that we see in the lives of the Imams, especially the 6th Imam and 11th Imam, that they would actually reward the poets for composing Marsiyah for the events of Karbala. And the whole phenomenon of crying has been emphasized by the Imams themselves. There is a very famous hadith where we are told, Man baka wa abka wa tabaka wajabat lahul jannah. And the literal translation would be that whoever cries on Hussein, whoever makes other cry on Hussein, or if a person, as I said, tragedy affects people at different levels. There might be a person, who really cannot come up to the level of crying. Imam says, whoever cries, whoever makes others cry, waman tabaka. Tabaka means somebody who makes a sad face, doesn't cry. But like a person who is going through sadness, wajabat lahul jannah. Jannat will become wajib for that person. These ahadith are there just to emphasize the point of the azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. But let me now, explain this hadith, because then there are some people who take these words of the Imams to the other extreme. They say, Imam said cry, make others cry, or make this a sad face, and Jannat is guaranteed. I don't know how to do anything else. No, this is not what the Imams meant. We are really trying to push the statement to the level that Imams never intended that. The Prophet of Islam himself, during the early days in Mecca, his slogan was, قُولُوا لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ تُفْلِحُ. It's a common statement he used to make in Mecca. What does it mean? It means say La ilaha illallah and you will get salvation in the hereafter. Does it mean that just saying La ilaha illallah was sufficient? You didn't even have to say Muhammadun Rasulullah? Of course. La ilaha illallah was the foundation. That's why Rasulullah would mention that. It doesn't mean that, just saying La ilaha illallah was sufficient for falah and salvation in the hereafter. You had to take the whole package. So Rasulullah, Muhammadun Rasulullah would be there. The teachings of Quran would be there. the example of the prophet would be there, the instruction that he gave, all would be requirements and conditions for falah and salvation in the hereafter. Or for example, there is a very famous story, and I'm sure you heard about it, in the life of our eighth Imam, Imam Musa Rizvi alayhi salatu was Ali ibn Musa Rizvi alayhi salatu was salam. In his famous journey to Marv, he stopped for a few days in Nishapur, which was a kind of a cultural and academic center those days. Many scholars there, many muhaddiseen, of course, mostly Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And when he was continuing his journey, the scholars actually came by the caravan, the caravan which was living now with the Imam, and they stopped him. They said, before you leave, we would like to hear one more hadith from you from Rasulullah. Because they had never heard any hadith directly coming from the family of the Prophet. And there, the Imam, who was on his, the litter on the camel, with all the, royal, it was a royal caravan, arranged by Harun Ma'mun al-Rashid himself. And so the curtain and everything was there. So Imam opened the curtain, looked outside, and there were people in thousands gathered there. And their request was that before you leave, we would like to hear one more hadith from you. And there, Imam Rizvi alayhi salam recites the famous hadith known as Hadith Silsilat al-Dhahab. It's a long story, but the hadith is actually a hadith Qudsi. It's not the statement of Rasulullah. It is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quoted by Rasulullah, but not part of the Quran. That is why it's known as Hadith Qudsi, where the Prophet said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Kalimatu la ilaha illallah hisni. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the kalima of Tawheed, when you say la ilaha illallah, this is my castle, my fort. وَمَنْ دَخَلَ حِسْنِي أَمِنَ مِنْ عَذَابِي. Whoever says that enters into my castle, and he will be protected from my azab. That was the end of Hadith Qudsi. Imam put the curtain down. But then after moving a few steps, he asked the rider of the camel to stop again, lifted the curtain again. Now Imam gives the commentary. وَلَكِنْ بِشُرُوطِهَا. The statement of Rasulullah, quoting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that whoever says La ilaha illallah enters into my castle, and whoever is into my castle will be protected from my azab. Imam says, this is true. وَلَكِنْ بِشُرُوطِهَا. But it comes with certain conditions. وَعَنَا مِنْ شُرُوطِهَا. And one of those conditions is me. So you have to not only say La ilaha illallah, you have to say Muhammadun Rasulullah and Aliyyun Waliullah and believe in all the Imams till himself. And so وَلَكِنْ بِشُرُوطِهَا is a given there. So when the Imams say مَنْ بَكَى وَأَبْكَى أَوْ تَبَاكَى عَلَى وَجَبَتْ لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ, whoever cries on Hussein or makes other cry on Hussein or makes a sad face, Jannat is wajib on him. But the given statement there is وَلَكِنْ بِشُرُوطِهَا. This azadari has to be done with its conditions. That's where the Jannat will become wajib. Even in English, let me just further emphasize this point. Even in English, there are some sayings. And I'm sure you heard about it many, many times. You hear this, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. What does it mean? Does it make sense? Has anyone challenged that doesn't make sense? No, everybody says it's correct. But it has to be understood in the proper context. Does it mean you just eat one apple a day and that's all? That saying is there just to emphasize that your diet should not be only of one category. Don't just eat meat all the time. Or just vegetables all the time. Combine. You have meat, you have grain, you have fruits, you have vegetables, A balanced diet has to be there. So that statement is a valid statement, and apple a day keeps the doctor away, but keep that in a broader context. And so these ahadith that our imams are saying, man baka aw abka aw tabaka wajabat lahu al-jannah, that whoever cries on Hussein or makes other cry on Hussein or makes a face of a person who is crying, Jannat is wajib. Absolutely true statement. Walakin bishurutiha. Remember that. But there are conditions which come with it. And the conditions is that we have to live, try to live by the values for which Imam Hussein alayhi salam sacrificed everything. His companions, his relatives, his own children, and his own life. That is the condition which comes with the process of Azaf Sayyid al-Shuhada. Salawat. एक बार सलावत पढ़ दें. So what is the purpose behind all these gatherings that we have, the majalis and the ziyarat? You know, what are we looking at the end? Is it just the issue of crying or making others cry and making sad face? No. That is the way of expressing our love. But the end result, the objective is something else. We do all this as a way of reviving our own spirit as far as our faith is concerned. And this is kind of renewing our bay'at with the Ahlul Bayt on an annually basis. And this is what I would say it's very important when we do the ziyarat, when we recite the ziyarah, especially for this special days. It's not good enough just to look at the Arabic wordings if you're not an Arab. Namaz is something else. When we do the act of worship, whether we understand Arabic or not, we still have to do it in Arabic. There is a reason for it. Whether you understand or not, you still have to do it. You are in mood of doing it or not, you still have to do it. You are tired, you still have to do it. It is wajib. But when it comes to dua or ziyarat, remember, this is not wajib. And what does dua mean? It means you are asking something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does it make sense to ask something that you do not even know what you are asking? This is where it becomes important when you recite du'as to also read the translation. Similarly, when we talk about ziyarat, ziyarat means to go and visit someone. For our imams and the shuhada, it doesn't matter whether they're alive or dead. When we do the ziyarat, we are actually talking to them. And when we are talking to them, according to one of the ziyarat for Rajab that we have from the 9th Imam, actually there is a statement where we say, "O Imam, I am certain that my words and salam are reaching to you. And I'm sure you're responding to my salam, even though I cannot hear." It's not that the response is not coming. We are not equipped with that signal or the wavelength to hear the response from the Imams. And this will only happen if we know what we are saying. When we talk about our majalis, our ziyarat and everything, look at the wordings that we have. For example, the ziyarat of the 1st of Rajab about Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Just one statement from there, where we say to Hussein, Labbaik da'i Allah. Labbaik is where we are responding to somebody. Da'i means somebody who is calling. Da'i Allah means somebody who is calling us towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Labbaik da'i Allah means I am responding to you, O the one, Hussein, who is calling us towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then what do you say? In kana lam yujibka badani in the istighasatika. We all know the story of the day of Ashura. When he did the istighasa, when he asked for help, hal min nasirin yansuruna, wa hal min mughithin yughithuna. This is where we are referring to it. And now we are saying that all da'i Allah, I am responding to you. In kana lam yujibka badani. عند استغاثتك ولساني عند استنصارك. O Hussein, although my body was not there, I wasn't born at that time. I physically did not respond to your call for help on that day. فَقَدْ أَجَابَكَ قَلْبِي وَالسَّمْعِ وَبَصَرِي. But now, centuries after that event, your words are still there. And now my heart and my ears and my eyes are responding to you. Think about it. When you are saying those words, what do we mean? What do we mean by these words? Qalb is inside. When somebody calls us, we actually can know that call either by looking or by hearing. So your call is coming. Even though we don't hear the words, we were not there to see, but we are being told, we read about it. And this call is coming to us, and now we are responding to you on that level of qalb. What does that mean? To understand that, let us go to the ziyarat of the day of Ashura. One statement from that explains this meaning, where we say, Allahumma ja'al mahyaya mahya Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, wa mamati mamata Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Where in the ziyarat, we are praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After doing the ziyarat, I was saying that Allah make my life best on the life of Muhammad and ali Muhammad. And make my maut, my death, on the path of Muhammad and ali Muhammad. How can that be? If on a practical level we are not with Muhammad and ali Muhammad. So this majalis, the process of aza, the ziyarat that we recite, all are giving us this message, that this is a way of renewing your allegiance and your loyalty to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wassalam. Salawat. We also have a very good tradition in many Shia communities around the world. On Thursday nights, we recite this ziyarat known as Ziyarat Warith. You do that here also? And I urge you, I see the Qibla is in that direction, your screens are over here. I wish it was the other way around. So when you are reciting the ziyarat, you can actually see the translations also. And I assure you, whether it's Dua Kumail or Ziyarat Warisa, even if you don't learn Arabic language, if you just look at the Arabic lining and the translation coming again and again, if you do it for 2 months, then you will have the understanding of the various themes of the ziyarat, even if you do not know the word, the translation word by word. Ziyarat Warisa that you have, it's actually kind of a weekly opportunity to renew our bay'at with the Imam of the time. By addressing Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Look at it, look at these words. And I don't want you to be afraid and not to recite the ziyarat again. Because when you don't know, you just say things. But sometimes when you come to realize what you are saying, you might be afraid that should I be saying this or not? Because when you say it with understanding, you are actually committing yourself to something. There is a phrase there in Ziyarat Warisa where you say, أشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياؤه ورسله, which means that I am making Allah and His angels and His prophets and His messengers my witness. Think about it. What are you going to say? You yourself are putting yourself in that liability, where you are saying that Allah is my witness, the Malaika are my witness, the Anbiya and the Rasul are my witness. Witness to what? أَنِّي بِكُمْ مُؤْمِنٌ وَبِإِيَّابِكُمْ, that I have Iman in you. And I have Iman that one day someone from you will come. مُؤْقِنٌ بِشَرَائِ دِينِ وَخَوَاتِيمِ عَمَلِي. I have this, I am mu'min. I have this Iman based on the strong foundation of the Sharia and the actions that I do, I know there are consequences at the end. وَقَلْبِي لِقَلْبِكُمْ سِلْمٌ وَعَمْرِي لِعَمْرِكُمْ مُتَّبِعٌ. I make Allah and the Malaika and the Anbiya and the Rusul the witness that my heart submits to your heart, and my command is at the disposal of your command. You are saying to Hussein. Just think about it. And so even these ziyarat are there not just for rituals. This is actually a commitment on a weekly basis to renew our bay'at to the Imam of our time, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajul Sharif. Amri li amrikum muttaba'. My command, is in the submission to your command. And what happens in our society? We say, yeah, we know this is haram, this is makruh, but I want to do this way. This is where you realize you're not being faithful there. By making Allah and the Malaika and the Prophets and the Messengers as witness and saying this. Many times we have to realize that yes, things we like and we desire. But our desire and our like whatever we like, has to be in sync with the like and dislike of the Ahlul Bayt. We actually are submitting now. Amri li amrikum muttaba', qalbi li qalbikum silm. What kind of silm is there? When we know that this is what Allah, Rasul and the Imam has said, still I do the opposite way. And this is what I'm saying, that this whole process of Adha of Sayyid al-Shuhada is a very powerful institution if we understand it properly. And the reason why the enemies target this and nothing else, because they know that this is a very unique method of, number one, mass education. And this is a way of reviving our commitment to our deen and madhab and our imams. And therefore they target this and nothing else, using labels like bid'ah and this and that. But this is where we have to realize that our lifeline, as far as our survival of the faith is concerned, is the azah of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Salawat. I think I said quite a lot. I still have a few things, but let me summarize very quickly. Tomorrow is Saturday. I think it should be okay. I've come from very far away. Salawat. If everybody had been here, maybe I didn't have to go through the summary in the beginning. So I had to just discount that timing. When we talk about this process of azaf, Sayyid al-Shuhada, especially when it's done not on an individual level, on the communal level, where, we sit down, we have marsiyah, we have nawha and matam at the end, we have speech by reciters. This is definitely a religious tradition, no doubt about it. As I said, this is the sunnah of the Prophet and the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt. They have emphasized it. But we also have to realize that this tradition of azadari is affected by cultural environment. The element of time and place has its own role in how we do things. And therefore you will see that, many things evolve differently in different environments. You look at the Shia community, across the Muslim world. You have the Arabs in Lebanon and Iraq, for example, or in the Gulf area. Then you have the Persians in Iran and Afghanistan. And then you have the Urdu-speaking people, mostly Urdu-based, Shia communities in South Asia. And you will see that, the way they do the azadari is not always the same. It is because of the environment, the time and the space, which has an impact, and people, evolve in that way. And this is where you see, for example, language. The Arabs will do it in Arabic. In Iran, they'll do it in Persian. Other communities will do in their own languages. In India, because of the influence of the Urdu language as a common language of the Muslims, Urdu is there. Although even other languages are used. Now we have moved from those lands to North America, for example. And here the common language is English. And so it is evolving. I remember when I came first time to Canada in 1983, I used to do the English portion of the Majlis only 10 minutes. And the rest of the Majlis was in Urdu. Now, almost after 30 years, 80% is in English, 10% is in Urdu. So there has been a change, gradual change, because of the environment, the time and place has its own impact. So the language will change. This is what I'm saying, poetry. The change can come, but the change will come gradually. You can't force it. And it has to come in a very, systematic manner. We need to fill the hearts of our young people with the love for Hussein and the family of Hussein and the Ahlul Bayt. That's where this, their feelings and emotions will come up. And only then you will have meaningful English poetry. Talking about the Azam of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Yes, we see examples now. Things are moving in that direction. But this takes its own time and place. It cannot be forced. There are communities where still they insist in keeping their own ethnic, language. There is no absolutely a problem with that if they want to do it. But there are segments of our Shia community in North America who are using the local language in order to express their own, devotion and the love for Ahlul Bayt and the Imams. And there is absolutely, nothing wrong in that. So the variety of manifestation of Azadari would be there. The only problem is sometimes we get into difficulties in not being able to understand the symbolism of some of the things which are done in one culture different from the other culture. And this is where there is a need to, understand. This is very important. You can't just invent something from zero. You take those cultural issues. For example, you look at the Catholics. Italian Catholics still have their Italian, culture, Passion Play for Christ. They still do it in Toronto in the way they used to do over there. There might be a modification, language will change and things, but there's nothing wrong there as long as we can educate the next generation of the symbolism of some of the things that we do. For example, Matam. And the criteria would be, and this is very important for everybody to understand, that the tradition of Azadari, the way it's done, the method would evolve from time to time and place to place. But that change has to come within the bounds of the Sharia. Nothing should go against the values and the principles of the Sharia of the Ahlul Bayt. For example, when we talk about Matam, in Arabic Matam means something else, but in Urdu or, when we are talking about Sinezani, as they call it in Farsi, to do it as group, whether you line up or you stand in the circles, stand up or sit down, different cultures have different ways of doing it. And there is nothing wrong about it if a community is doing it according to their own cultural ways. Because there is nothing in the Sharia which says you cannot do Matam. Because when you do the normal Matam, you're not really harming yourself in an extent that, it's going to have a long-term impact on your health. When you talk about, for example, Julus, the procession, that people in many Muslim countries on the day of Ashura, the Shias, take it out. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. We just have to keep the time and the place in mind. it wouldn't make any sense to have the julus, for example, in New York or Houston or Dallas or Austin or Toronto, where the banners are in Urdu or in Arabic, for example, and the nohas are in all different foreign languages. The whole purpose of julus, going out of the Imam Bargas and Husainiyas, is to convey the message of Imam Hussain alayhi salam to the society in general. And so you have to look at their language. The banners should be in the local language. The speeches should be in the local language. Even the noha and the matam that you are doing, it should be something that people can understand it and get the message of what you are trying to say. Otherwise, if you're doing it only for yourself, you can do it inside the Imam Barga and Husainiyah. The whole purpose of going out is there to convey the message to the rest of the non-Shia, non-Muslim community. And so the language there becomes very important to understand. When we talk about alam, for example, what is this? This is a symbol of the valor and loyalty of Abbas bin Ali. This is what we have to understand, make our children understand what does this represent. When we talk about, for example, the mashk or the water bag, which is attached sometimes to the alam of Hazrat Abbas, this actually symbolizes the thirst of the children and the women and the men in Karbala on the day of Ashura. That they were denied a very basic, right of a human being, and that is water. When we look at, for example, even the symbolism of the cradle. In Iran, for example, they, on the day of Ashura, in their julus, they actually take a live baby. Sometimes they wrap the baby in the white cloth like kafan, sprinkled with red color. Even though the baby is crying there because it doesn't understand what is happening to it. But it has its own impact when people look at it. In South Asian culture, you don't do that. You don't have a live baby there. But what do? You have a cradle. Symbolizes a baby. And that actually shows the innocence of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. That his Yazidi forces were so barbaric that they did not even spare the 6-month-old baby of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And so there is a lot of symbolism there which has to be understood, and the next generation has to understand why it is being done. For example, even the tradition of taking out the horse in the julus. If you see in some countries, you will see when the king, for example, dies. The king has a special horse where nobody would sit on it. It is only for the king. And in the funeral of the king, you will see that horse would be paraded in front of the coffin as a symbol that now the king is no more there. So you have the riderless horse symbolizing the loss of the person there. And so in that way, this becomes a kind of the symbol of the martyrdom of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. But this has to be understood on a symbolic level only. Not to the extent that sometimes then people go and talk to that horse. No, this is what I'm saying. Within the limits that the Sharia has imposed. Understand what it is. It is nothing more than the symbol. And understand it in that way, and then it becomes more meaningful. Because we know that on the day of Ashura, when the horse came back to the tents, this is how most of the women, other than Sayyida Zainab, came to know that Imam is no more there, because the horse came alone. And so there's a lot of symbolism in the things which are done, but it has to be done with proper awareness and understanding of the symbolic aspect of it. Salawat from the Iqbal. Let me make a final comment on this issue that Azadari is an action. It is not an issue of belief. It is not an aqidah. It is amal. And since it is amal, it becomes, within the parameter of the Sharia. And so if there are any issues there, you will have to always refer, like when you do namaz and roza and other things which are actions, You refer to your mujtahid and marja. And so any issue when it comes even to azadari, it is amal. There is no doubt about it. Anyone says anything else, really they don't know what they're talking about. So azadari is an amal, is an action. As an action, it falls within the bones of the Sharia. And if we have a doubt about something, whether this should be done or not, this is where you have to refer to your marja, your mujtahid. They will look at the principles of the Sharia, look at the impact that it would have on a symbolic level in the time and the place that we are, and then they will guide you whether you should do this or not. So this is something we have to understand. If that understanding is there, inshallah, this process can be continued in a more powerful and meaningful way than it was being done in the past, inshallah. Salawat. Last night I used the examples as far as mourning process is concerned and grieving from the contemporary history of America, the event of 9/11. As I said, I'm not talking about who did it, why it happened. We're just using it there as an example of understanding how a community, when it is faced with a tragedy, how it reacts. And we talked about some of the examples and symbolism last night. Let me end with the majlis with one more example. We know that when the first tower collapsed, the firefighters were there, more than 300 of them, and who were going into the buildings trying to bring the people out. And when both towers collapsed, the firefighters, about 300 of them, lost their lives. And these were the purely innocent guys who were going to help others. And in that process, not the bodies of everyone was found. There was one event which really caught my attention. This event happened on 9/11. But the story that I'm narrating is something around December of that year. There was a family of one of the firemen from New York City whose body was not found. And the family was finding it very difficult to put a closure to the tragedy for them on a personal level. Because if the body is found, they can still go through the rituals of their own religion and bury the person. And that's the end, it kind of gives them a closure to continue their lives. But since the body was not found, it was very difficult for them to handle that tragedy. And therefore they decided that even though they have not found the body of their family member, they would still go through the funeral process. They talked with the fire department. They also agreed. And this is what I saw on the TV, which caught my attention, because the fire engine had a coffin on it, wrapped in the American flag, with firemen and policemen lined up on the streets on both sides, where the coffin is being taken to the church. And the coffin was taken down with honor and respect, which is given to such individuals. They went into the church. The ceremony was done by their priest the way it's done normally. Then they brought the coffin back. This is where the reporter's remarks caught my attention, when the reporter said that the coffin was empty. And I started to think about it, that, it's not only the Shias who take out this taboot, or naql as Farsi, in Farsi they call it, on the day of Ashura. This coffin in the name of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. This can happen to anyone. It's nothing unusual. It's not weird. Sometimes we think the things that we are doing, people would not understand. Put individuals there. If they go through that suffering and they are touched by that suffering personally, this is how they're going to react. For that family, it was very important, to go through that process and take out that coffin, although the body was not there. They wanted to have, kind of a closure for themselves. For us on the day of Ashura, when we remember the tragedy of Karbala, when we are told that after everything had ended, on the 11th of Muharram, Umar ibn Sa'd ordered his soldiers to bury those men who were killed from his side. But then nobody thought about the body of the grandson of Rasulullah. His body was left there, along with the shuhada. They didn't even bother about it. Whereas decency demands that even if it is the body of your enemy in the battlefield, you basically have to show respect to it. But what did they do? On the evening, after the day of Ashura, Umar ibn Sa'd actually asked for 10 volunteer horsemen to come. To do what? He says, Ibn Ziyad has ordered me that after you kill Hussein, I want his body to be trampled. These are the people who are saying Muhammadun Rasulullah. And right there you have the body of who? Hussein bin Fatima bint Rasulullah. And no respect for that. And this 10 mal'oon come in and volunteer for that. And they actually rode their horses back and forth in such a way that our sixth Imam says that the chest of the Imam was actually trampled so that it came and touched the spine of the Imam. Just think about the emotions and the sentiment of Zainab when she saw this happening to the body of Hussein. Just think about Imam Zainul Abidin. We are here, many of us are immigrants. Our parents are all here. And those who are still, the parents who are back home, we always have this wish that when the news will come that the father or the mother is passing away, I want to be there. I want to be there close. I want to be able to fulfill the last rites of my father or mother. Just think about Imam Zainul Abidin. For us, distance becomes sometimes a difficult stage at that moment in life when we hear about our parents far away back home, where even to travel there and to reach becomes difficult for us. But Imam Zainul Abidin was not that far away. Look at the distance, the place, the maqtal of Imam Hussein and the tent of Imam Zainul Abidin. The distance was not that different, that far away. But Imam didn't have, the circumstances did not allow him to go there to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And therefore on the 11th of Muharram, when the Ahl Harab and the family of Hussein were made captives, and when their caravan was taken through the area where the bodies of the Shuhada were lying on the ground, this is where you see Zainab throwing herself down by the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. This is where you see that a lady who are more emotional at that time, Zainab was crying on the body of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but then she raised her face and looked at the face of Imam Zainul Abidin. When she looked at this sadness and grief and sorrow reflecting on the face of Imam Zainul Abidin, she stopped herself. And she says, "Oh my son, what is happening to you? It shouldn't be that you die with grief." And this is where Imam Zainul Abidin says, "Oh my aunt, why shouldn't I be in this way? I am alive and young, but I cannot give kafan to my father or bury him. We are being taken without putting him in the grave." And this is where Zainab said, "Oh my son, do not grieve that much. My father has told me a time will come, there will be a shrine for your father, and people in thousands will come and visit the shrine of your father, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون." May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our brief ibadat and the zikr of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. May Allah increase our tawfiqat, forgive our sins. May Allah give us the wisdom to understand the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and to try to live and be loyal to their teachings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep the Shias of Ali wherever they are, whether it's in Syria or Iraq, Bahrain, Afghanistan or Pakistan. May He keep them in under His protection, and may He keep the Takfiri and Salafi forces away from the Mu'mineen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they are capable of being guided, guide them. And if they are not capable of them, Allah eliminate their power and their strength and hasten the appearance of the Imam of the time. أجل الله تعالى فرج الشريف. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی زندگی ہم کو یہی وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی زندگی ہم کو یہی وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی زندگی ہم کو یہی وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی زندگی ہم کو یہی دشت کربل میں تیرا لاش تیروں پہ پڑا رو رہی تھی یہ زمین آسمان روتا رہا ہائے مادر وہ تیری بہن یہ کرتی رہی اے میرے پیارے حسین گود میں آؤ ذرا صرخت فاطمة الحسين انقتل يرقد على سحام وحبيبي ولدي وارث علم نبي یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی زندگی ہم کو یہی وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی تیرے اصغر کا گلا تیرے اکبر کا جگر بھائی عباس کے غم میں تیری ٹوٹی کمر اور پامال بدن رن میں قاسم کا ہوا ایک دن میں ہی لٹا کربلا میں تیرا گھر ذبیح کل بنی تسجد انت جبی تشکر خالقک یا الہ الازلی وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی زندگی ہم کو یہی وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی ہائے بے شیر تیرا بے زباں قتل ہوا پیاس کے بدل جسے ظلم کا تیر ملا القمہ روتی رہی لرزی کربل کی زمین تم نے جب اس کا لہو اپنے چہرے پہ ملا وبکا نہر الفرات راحت من جسم حیات عند وصل السحمی على حلقوم الزکی وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی زندگی ہم کو یہی وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی زندگی ہم کو یہی رن میں تلوار بنا آئے عباس علی ہر طرف حملہ ہوا مشک پانی بھی چھدی آنکھ میں تیر لگا اور پیوست ہوا دونوں بازو کو کٹا کے گرا اسب جری وہوا کل الوفا یصرخ بر وسمع سقط عباس جری من حسان خشبی وارث علم نبی یا حسین ابن علی تیرے صدقے سے ملی زندگی ہم کو یہی وارث علم نبی تیرے صدقے سے ملی असर आशूर का वक्त कैसे हम भूल सके, आई आवाज अज़ां आप घोड़े से गिरे, खेमे के दर पे तेरी बहन खून रोती रही, था तेरा पाक गला शिमर के तेग तले, अक्तुबु कैफा अना रब्बुका यंजुरुका थुम्मा अल्लाह यक़ूल अर्जी इला रब्बुकी वारिस इल्म नबी या हुसैन इब्न अली, तेरे सदक़े से मिली जिंदगी हमको यही, वारिस इल्म नबी या हुसैन इब्न अली, तेरे सदक़े से मिली जिंदगी हमको यही, या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या
Ya Hussein, 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 Hussein Aziz Zahra, 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 Aziz Zahra, Hussein Aziz Zahra, ای بی کفن برادر حسین 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 حسین، بر حال من نظاره حسین 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 حسین، جان میدهم به یاد حسین 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 حسین، آن جسم پاره پاره حسین 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 حسین، از داغ کام خشکت دل خسته و کبابم، دل خسته و کبابم، ای سر بریده چون تو در زیر آفتابم، در زیر آفتابم، حسین عزیز زهرا، عزیز زهرا، حسین عزیز زهرا، حسین عزیز زهرا، حسین عزیز زهرا، حسین عزیز زهرا، کی میبرم ز خاطر حسین حسین حسین، قد خمید را حسین 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 حسین، آن قامت رشیده حسین حسین حسین، در خون تپیده را حسین 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 حسین، کی می رود ز یادم لبخند آخر تو، لبخند آخر تو، در پیش دیدگانم بریده شد سر تو، بریده شد سر تو، حسین عزیز زهرا، 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 یا حسین
السلام عليكم يا عبد الله، السلام عليكم يا رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا فاطمة الزهراء، السلام على جدك وأبيك، السلام على أمك وأخيك وعلى أولادك المعصومين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليكم أيها الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليكم مغش الشيط والزفار في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك صاحب الأسر والزمان، السلام عليك خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك إمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى ظهوركم مخرجك ورحمة الله وبركاته.